And now it's time for the Daily Breakdown with Mr. Keelan.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are watching this. Welcome to another installation of the Breakdown with Mr. Keelan. I hope you're having a great Wednesday. Shout out to all of our Ultraismo friends. Had to share that I was wearing this with you. So you can share because Ultraismo is the house of sharing. So far, we've been talking a lot about the Articles of Confederation. What led up to its drafting, what worries went into it, and how it set up a pretty weak government. We're going to talk today about one of the more kind of positive legacies, definitely, impactful legacies of the Articles of Confederation, and that's going to be the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Let's look at our objectives for the lesson. Hey. First, by the end of the video and the article, you should be able to explain the impacts that the Northwest Ordinance had on shaping future westward expansion. And also, at the end of the video, didn't get into this too much in the article, but I think it's something that you should understand as we're dealing with westward expansion, is an ideal called Manifest Destiny. Sounds like the name of a band. Well, Manifest Destiny is going to be it's going to become the justification for a lot of things that the people of the U.S. do in pushing westward. And we see that ideal kind of first gets laid in seed with the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Big question. Anything good happened after the Articles of Confederation? From what we've seen so far, it was really weak. Didn't have an executive branch, didn't have a judicial branch, couldn't really pass laws effectively. Everything was done voluntarily. All the powers in the states. Kind of give you an analogy. It's kind of like a team where the coach can make suggestions to the players, but if the players don't take any action, the coach can't, hold them from playing, can't have any impact. So they can just say, well, I think you should run 10 laps right now. I don't want to, coach. Okay. That's kind of the government that the Articles of Confederation made. But one of the lasting, impactful laws that came out of the time of the Confederation Congress is the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. There's not many because, as mentioned, it was so hard to get laws passed during the period that we were under the Articles of Confederation as our Constitution. So, what was this Northwest Ordinance of 1787? Essentially, after remember when we talked about the Proclamation 1763 and a lot of the things leading up to the Revolution, colonists wanted to push westward. They wanted to go into the territories in Ohio, the Ohio River Valley, so on and so forth. The British were barring them from doing so after the French and Indian War. So now that they won their independence, part of getting their independence was, hey, all that land that Britain once claimed after the French and Indian War, everything east of the Mississippi River, is now ours. So how are we going to populate it? What are we going to do? If eventually enough people move into parts of the territory that they want to become a state, how are we going to do that? So the Northwest Ordinance sets up the precedent of how future states will join the country and how kind of sets a formula for future westward expansion. So when we're talking about the Northwest, we're talking about what was the northwestern part of the United States territories at that point. Today is, the Great Lakes states is not the most western part. We go from sea to shining sea now, but the most northwestern part is the areas around the Great Lakes, states like Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and parts of Minnesota. So, in order, this basically says if a territory wants to become a state, went through all these different procedures. And the article went through it in detail. But the main thing you need to know is that they set a standard. All right, well, first, you have to have a certain population to do certain qualifying things to become a member of the United States, to join the Union. Second, they needed to have a state constitution. We talked in the last video about how important the state constitutions were in setting forward the U.S. Constitution. So the idea that the state had to have some sort of framework of government, some organization, some guarantee and protection of liberties was pretty important. Another one that was a big deal was that they had to have some sort of protection on basic civil rights. A lot of things that we mentioned in a previous video, like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press. A lot of those things we're going to see in the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution when that goes into effect. Now, in the Northwest Territory, they also put in writing, because we already said there's a growing, after the American Revolution, there's a growing abolitionist movement. So they said that the new territories, any new territory, had to also pass laws abolishing slavery within them, which is going to work for the Northwest Territories. We're not going to see any amount of significant slavery in any of those states as they would eventually become. But this is one part of the precedent that's going to be ignored. And we're going to see, as new states enter the Union, there's going to be a tit-for-tat bounce back between free states and slave states, free states, slave states, always trying to keep an equal number, because the slave states are so nervous of being outnumbered that, because then they think that there would be laws limiting and eventually abolishing slavery. So they want to protect that institution as much as possible. As dreadful as that is part of what happens. Another thing that I found a little bit ironic reading in it is that there's language in the law that says that you can't take Native American lands unless they're compensated or given away voluntarily, which the history of the United States, that's just ignored. And it just is, you could say, as part of a long-standing precedent that the U.S. government will have in ignoring treaties and their own rules regarding Native Americans and their land and territory. Here's a big view of all of the states that became part of the U.S., part of the, eventually, they're all part of the Northwest Ordinance. First one being Ohio, which makes sense since that was the big push to go in Ohio during the French and Indian War. And lastly would be Minnesota. We can see almost like that there was a steady westward push. One last thing I'd like to talk about is the idea of manifest destiny. This is a commonly held ideal belief that was held by many people living in the U.S. at the time, that the expansion of the U.S. government across the continent of North America, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, was A, inevitable, that it was going to happen, B, that was justified. Many argued that it was the will of God for the U.S. government to spread its ideals, republicanism, democracy, all those things, from sea to shining sea. Eventually it will happen. Whether or not it's a divine intervention, that's up for you to decide. But that idea of manifest, that is part of who we are, is our destiny to be, is the will of God for us to fulfill this spreading of our nation, the spreading of our country, this expansion of our country steadily west. And we're going to see that this belief leaves many Americans feeling justified in doing some things I just previously mentioned, in taking Native American land, so on and so forth. And that as the U.S. expands steadily westward, the precedent set in the Northwest Territory and the Northwest Ordinance plus coupled with that idea of manifest destiny, is going to see the U.S. steadily grow. This is a famous painting that depicts that ideal. You can see pioneers steadily moving westward, train tracks, telegraph lines, all these things that are stretching west. You see the angel there is leading the way. That's the will of God for America to spread westward. So that manifest destiny is a big part of the ethos of westward expansion. And as you see, same picture has been behind me this whole time, the U.S. eventually will expand from sea to shining sea. So those precedents will definitely have an impact. Final question from me today to post up to try to get some extra points is explain your own words what the idea of manifest destiny is, and see if you can find some more information about it on the web. Post up any web resources with your answer that you find. Just want to see that you're looking up some more information on it. It's a pretty complex idea, but we're going to see that it has a long-lasting legacy in U.S. history. Well, I hope you share a great day with your friends and family, friends via the computer, family at home, and are all safe and well. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a marvelous Wednesday.